Hello, and welcome to episode 21 of Scholarly Snippets. I am your host, Stephen Sorensen. Today, or before I get into who my guest is, this is my talk show where I talk about history and I interview people who have degrees in a field that is history or is related to history. So today I am joined by a guest with a Bachelor's of Business Administration majoring in management, which technically isn't related to history, but it definitely has played into his historical endeavors. He then got a master's degree in 2012 majoring in history. He also has a master's of fine arts in writing, which he obtained in 2019. He is a teacher at an online college teaching 3 courses in history, and he's also a teacher at a community college teaching history and English. Trico, thanks for joining me today. How are you
Hey,
doing?
doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yep, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to having this talk. I'm also kind of interested in the atmosphere of teaching history, kind of what you have to do to go about doing that, and what does it look like. But before we get into the current present day, what can you tell us about what originally got you interested in history?
Originally, I guess, I grew up in the 80s. I was an 80s kid, and there's a ton of really cool movies about time travel, like Back to the Future and stuff. And so I was always kind of obsessed with time travel as a kid. And I think history is kind of the best way to kind of become a time traveler because you can read about it. You can go to reenactments and like the Henry Ford over here in Michigan. There's like the Henry Ford Village and everything, so you can kind of see firsthand all these objects from history. So that was kind of my way of
There,
being a time traveler without like
sorry
an
to
Einstein
interrupt.
Rosen bridge.
Sorry to interrupt. I hate interrupting my guests, but I also felt it worthy of mention to mention. I think it's called Historical Hill, or there's an association. The I think you were talking about the museum, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
In Grand Rapids, Michigan, and there's an association here that has a whole list of historic houses, and people still live in them today, but they're registered as a historic house, and I think they're all houses from the 1800s, which is also really cool for historians. Sorry to interrupt, but I felt like that was worth mentioning. You're my first guest that I think is from Michigan. I'm also from Michigan, and so it's fun to talk about Michigan history a bit. Uh, so, yeah,
Definitely. Yeah.
you were looking into time travel. Also, I agree. History is just about as close you can get without buying a time travel machine off eBay. So, yeah, please continue. Sorry
Oh,
about that.
yeah. No, that's pretty much it. I figure it's a closest thing we have to time travel and learning about how people lived at different times and thinking about the different technology and objects and everything they used. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what got me into it at first.
So, thanks for sharing that. What is your major is in just history, just pure history. Is there any specific period of time that you focused on?
Yeah, the program for my MA in history, it was really kind of focused on American history. Um, and mine, like my thesis, you didn't have to do a thesis on American history, but it had to be very adjacent to American history because that was the strength of the program. So mine's kind of on the Revolutionary or the Mexican Revolutionary War and kind of how it was interpreted here, or the effects of it here and vice versa. So mostly my graduate work was all American history related, especially they at the time those professors really really strong in the Civil War, so the program did very well preparing us for that. And another professor is like really really strong for World War II, so I kind of came out really prepared to teach both of those, and so far I haven't been able to teach them yet.
What? we'll get back to your teaching. I was gonna go off and ask you about that, but we'll get back to that in a bit. When you first started attending school, I know you got your bachelor's of administration and business, but what what originally? How did you go about choosing a school for? Well, first for your bachelor's, and then tell us about how you went about choosing a school for your master's.
Yeah, that was kind of a weird journey with different zigzags and everything. I was working and I was a single parent, so I was working in the automotive field and I wanted to move up. So I'm like, all right, I gotta get a degree, management bachelor degree, so I can move up and make some more money. So I did that. I got the Bachelor of Business Administration with a concentration in management, so I could move up. But I always wanted to be a history teacher, like ever since high school or junior high. So that was always in my mind. So I'm like, all right, once uh, obviously you can't get a master's to get a bachelor degree. So in my like naivety, I thought, well, I'll get a bachelor in management, so I get a job, and then since I have a bachelor degree, I'll just apply for a program in history, and that's not how it works. A lot of times they don't say on the college website you have to have a undergrad in history, but it does limit your chances of getting into different programs. Luckily, I found a college. It was a really small college in the Metro Detroit area that had a master's in history program, and it was kind of set up like a cohort, which I like. So they accepted me over there. I had some undergraduate history credits from general studies courses that I took. So I had 12 undergraduate history courses. So they felt that kind of prepared me enough for the program. And since I was always reading history and really into it and everything, I kind of just came with a lot of knowledge anyways, just from my own reading and everything. So I felt I was pretty much prepared for the master's program, and I didn't really struggle too much in it. So luckily, all the history reading and everything paid off.
Cool. Um, what? How'd you go about choosing a major? Because clearly you were in business and then went to history. I know you kind of answered that just now, but to answer it sort of concisely, how would you go about explaining that?
Oh, yeah. So the undergrad degree, it was just out of necessity. I chose business, and then for the kind of area concentration for the master's in history, it was almost by default because they didn't offer a lot of different focus areas in the program that I ended up getting into. So it was American history, which was good because I was familiar with it. If I had my choice and I could have went to any college, because I was a single parent, so I was kind of had to stay in the Metro Detroit area. If I could have went to any college, I would have chose probably ancient history. But at the time, it worked out. I had a pretty good knowledge of American history, and that was the main concentration they offered at the graduate program I went into. So it worked out, and I was happy with it.
I know we talked about this before I started recording, and
Mhm.
the concept of a curveball question that wasn't on the list that we had, kind of that we're working off of here. But in your opinion, how popular is contemporary history, like modern American history, degree wise, compared to ancient history? Like, if like the amount of people that get contemporary history degrees compared to the ones that focus on ancient history, how would you gauge that?
I feel modern history is probably a lot more popular and a lot more uh, offered at different universities. Locally, like I'm in the Metro Detroit area, so can I say school names here?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean, I don't think
Like,
we'll get sued for copyright or anything, but
yeah,
I don't think you could. I don't think they have copyright domain over their college names.
cool. All right. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to, throw any shade or anything at
Well,
colleges.
I usually leave out the colleges unless a guest says something about it that they want me to mention it. Just because just for people's own anonymity.
Yeah.
But yeah, name as many. If you have a list of colleges you want to read off, I'm not opposed to you doing that.
No problem. All of them that turned me down for my grad program. Now's my time to get back at them. No, I'm kidding.
Alma, yeah, no, I've looked into that one. I was looking at colleges around here for history degrees, and that was one of
Mhm.
the top rated schools in Michigan for
Yeah,
historical studies.
yeah. Yeah, so like I'm in the Metro Detroit area, so Wayne State's a large university in the area. And for example, their program, you can, like for a PhD program, you can uh, do ancient history as part of your exam, but it can't be like your main focus. Like you can't do your dissertation on it.
Hmm.
And when I was looking around for like ancient history PhDs, because that's my next step is on to get a PhD. Um, a lot of places don't offer that for a PhD program. A lot of the colleges, it seems like they're kind of more geared towards modern history or American history. So
I see.
I think, mhm.
Yeah, no, thanks for answering that curveball question. I hope it wasn't too wild for you.
Oh no,
Uh,
no, it's good.
did you ever, so, you select your school, you start pursuing your degree, you have your major in mind and determined. Did you ever go about changing your major while you were getting one?
Uh, when I was in the graduate program for history, I didn't. I really loved the program, and I thought it was great. And there was part of me that was like, "Oh, I wish I was studying ancient history." But I really enjoyed the program, and I loved being around other people that are interested in history. But yeah, as an undergrad, I changed my major about every year. Like it took me 8 years to get an undergrad because I kept changing it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What did you, so you ended up with your bachelor's of business and administration. What did you do before that, if you don't mind
Uh,
me asking?
Oh yeah, no problem. Before that, I have associate in automotive and automotive technology. I'm from the Detroit area, so everything is about cars. So
Hmm.
so but even during that program, I took a year off from that, moved out to Lansing for a year, was studying collision repair out there. Moved back, went to school for I think a semester for the police academy program. Um, and then even once I started working on my Bachelor of Business Administration, they had different concentrations you could choose. And at first I was going for the management one. And then I took some accounting courses and they were so stressful. I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta change my major because I can't handle these accounting courses. So I was gonna change to like it was something like leadership communications or something, which it was all the same business classes, just no accounting. But then I ended up passing accounting, and I'm like, oh, this management concentration's not that bad. So I ended up staying with it. But yeah, I changed a lot. Even uh, before I went for the Bachelor of Business Administration, when I was first starting out, you know, I was taking a lot of business courses, and I was gonna focus more on marketing and sales, but I didn't really like marketing and sales that much, so I kind of changed my major a lot as an undergrad. Um, After undergrad, though, I stayed pretty focused on my graduate studies.
Another curveball question. This one wasn't on the list, but where was your history interest during that 8 years of sort of exploring different career choices and degrees?
Yeah, um, I was still reading history and everything, and for a while when I was working on my general electives, I always figured like, oh, I'll move out to Lansing and go to Michigan State and get a degree in teaching history, and then work at like high schools and then get a graduate degree and then teach at college. That was my original plan, and then I ended up having my daughter, so I had to kind of rearrange plans a lot because with a teaching degree, usually you have to take a year where you're doing your student teaching, and um, like I have friends that did the program and they would just kind of teach during the day and then work a job at night or on the weekends because you're not getting paid for student teaching. But with my daughter, that there was no way I'd be able to. I'd never be home. So that kind of made me shift my focus more into just finishing a management degree, because I already had all my general electives and general study credits and everything all taken care of.
Cool. So that's a good segue into this next question, which is about some of the challenges that you have faced over the. I imagine it's probably about a decade and a half now that you've spent pursuing degrees.
Yeah, it feels like forever.
What? So first, I'm not even really as much. I am interested in the challenges you faced getting the other degrees. Being a single parent, trying to go to school, work, and support your child. But I'm also really interested in hearing about the challenges that you faced while getting your master's in history.
Yeah, definitely. When I was in my master's in history program, I was a parts manager for a collision shop, a large collision shop. So my schedule was 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and then every other Saturday. So I was working basically 50 hours a week. And my classes at night, the program I had, they offered classes every Wednesday night and sometimes on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. And where I was working and where the college was about an hour drive under perfect conditions. So, like, if there was traffic or a snowstorm or rain, it was more like an hour and a half. So, every Wednesday, I'd leave work, like, kind of duck out of there 5 minutes before 6 o'clock to kind of give myself the extra 5 minutes, and then drive like a maniac for like an hour to get to class on time. Because most of the professors were pretty easygoing, but we had one professor that, yeah, every school has that professor that's kind of tougher than the other ones. And he would, class started at 7 p.m. and went till 10. At 7 p.m. on the dot, he would lock the door and he will not open the door until break time, because he would give us a break about halfway through the class. So if you weren't there by 7, you were locked out for half your class. So so it was kind of always a struggle getting there on time. Plus, with the workload, it was, uh, kind of tough getting all the homework done because you're writing papers all the time. Like, you're constantly researching and reading and writing papers, and there was a paper due every week. So it was a little bit tough. I made it through and everything. The first semester was tough. Going from an undergrad to a graduate, sometimes as an undergraduate, you're like, my dog was sick. Can I have an extra week for the paper kind of thing? And as a graduate, that doesn't fly at all. So, you kind of had to learn, like, deadlines are definite when you're in a graduate program. And not like they're always flexible when you're an undergrad, but sometimes you get a professor that's more flexible. But yeah, as a graduate, usually it was always deadlines are deadlines. And there was also, during the week, there was an online component to it, so you had to log in and do the discussion forum. And it had to be something pretty good and substantial, even when you're responding to other students. It can't be like, oh, good post, or, wow, that was a good post you did, very informative. Like, you had to, almost like a debate where you had to write, like, a page paragraph, either why you agree with what their post said, or, why you're detracting from it. So, the workload was pretty good. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to passion. Like, I loved history, so I didn't feel like I was doing work. And I have no one I know at the time, I didn't know anyone else that was into history. Like, my daughter doesn't like history, obviously, because her dad likes it, so it's lame because I like it. And none of my friends were into history, so I always like going to the discussion forum and going to class because I can finally talk about history with other people that are into it. So the workload can be kind of a struggle and everything, and it's a different mindset than being an undergrad. But if you really have a passion for history, you'll love it. It won't even feel like work.
Thanks for sharing all that. So basically, the two greatest struggles that I heard you talking about was getting to class on time,
Hmm.
the travel that you had to make because the school was located quite a bit a ways, an hour drive. It's quite a bit of time, and then also the workload. which I've heard quite a bit, especially from people pursuing their masters or their PhDs. How it is really a lot of work to go through, especially compared to the amount of work that you have to deal with in a bachelor's program. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to, um, you know, to
Sum it
phrase
up.
it. Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
you kind of hit on some of your favorite parts, but what were your favorite parts of going through all this?
Oh, I just like learning different things in history. It sounds weird. I was never that much into the Civil War, and it seems like every other historian I know loves the Civil War. So it was, cool taking a class on that and kind of learning more about that. World War One, I was always kind of into for some reason. And at the time, it was. Like we had a professor there that he wrote his dissertation on like the polar bears, which was like a group from Michigan that was in the First World War. So it was really interesting learning about that. And then like the Cold War, I was never really into that much, but it was such a fascinating thing. So I loved that class. And just getting exposure to some other areas, like we learned, there was a class in uh, modern East Asian history. So we, learned about India, and I had some undergraduate courses in Chinese history and Japanese history. So I was kind of familiar with that, but it kind of brought it more into like a modern perspective because it was modern history. So I really enjoyed that, and there was just a lot of classes uh, that normally I wouldn't have taken. Yeah, because if they had, it was a small program, so pretty much what classes they had you had to take. Whereas at a bigger college you have more options and everything. So like if I would have went to like a large university that had a ancient history program, I would have only taken ancient history stuff and never learned about all these other really cool time periods and places and everything in history.
So, to summarize your favorite parts, basically just learning. You
Mhm.
love to learn new information and you love history, and so learning new information about history really uh, hit the nail on the head there
Yeah.
for being your favorite thing. So, there's only you actually kind of have an interesting perspective on this next question because you only learn certain things while getting certain degrees. And so, what you might learn while getting one degree, you won't learn while getting another. What do you think are some of the key things that you learned while getting your master's that you wouldn't learn if you had pursued a different master's?
Oh, um, I guess the fact that no one ever listens to historians. Like as a historian, we kind of look at the politics and the economics and different social movements, and we kind of put it all together to figure out what the zeitgeist is of a certain time period. And then once we understand the spirit of the times, we kind of start looking at causes and effects and everything, as we study history. So even though we kind of learn a little bit about economics and politics and all these different things and why things happen, and hopefully how to prevent bad things from happening, like no one ever comes and asks us or like listens to us when we say, hey, this happened before in history, don't do it. you know so that was one thing I noticed, is like no one ever asked my opinion on any of this stuff, and a lot of it is very similar to things that already happened in history that I've studied. Yeah.
So, yeah, that was an interesting response. I definitely was not expecting that. The key thing that you learned while getting this was that people don't really listen to historians. That's
And
what
they
you,
should.
and they should.
Yeah.
That kind of resonates with this concept I've been exploring. It was brought up by Jonathan Zimmerman, who's
Mhm.
another historian, and he had mentioned that historians themselves aren't really trained to speak to anyone aside from other historians, and that they're really not trained to speak to the public and to communicate their information effectively. And so I've seen that kind of like, I think that there are definitely some historians out there that communicate really well to the public, but for the most part, it does seem that historians sort of only really talk to other historians, because it's kind of like speaking French to someone who doesn't speak French if they don't know anything
Exactly.
about history. So it's it's an interesting flux to try and figure out how to communicate this information that is almost incommunicable to somebody who doesn't understand anything about the ancient past, or even the modern past and modern history. So yeah, not listening to historians, that's definitely a novel take. Uh, you mentioned earlier that you want to pursue a PhD,
Mhm.
and you mentioned in ancient history.
Ideally, yeah. Uh, the local kind of larger university doesn't offer. You can have that as a kind of like a concentration, but
Can
not for
we
like your full
can we get a
thing.
name drop on that?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, no
Wayne State.
problem. Wayne
Wayne State.
State, we got your number now.
Yeah,
Like, you better add that course
and
to
we put
your,
them on blast.
yeah. Well, maybe, it's interesting. Part of the reason why I do this podcast is to get a sense of where things are at today. And it will, I mean, I don't know if anyone will ever study these for a case study on the modern status of history, but it it could possibly be noteworthy to note that Wayne State doesn't give out ancient history specializations yet. This is we're recording this on the 15th of July, 2020. Who knows? Maybe they'll get wind of this before it even releases, and they'll add that to their coursework.
Then someone will actually us because they'll look it up and be like actually, but it's not there right now.
Yeah, maybe it is there, and you just didn't see it. They've got it hidden behind the philosophy degree somewhere. Um,
Could be, yeah.
who knows? But enough jokes. I am appreciative that Wayne State even offers history degrees, because they aren't really. I don't know. Are colleges required to offer history courses, or?
Yeah, courses as far as degrees and everything, it kind of varies. I think most just regular four-year universities they'll have a history program. A lot of times it's more related to teaching history at um, like a K through 12 type level.
Mm-hmm.
The school I went to, it was for my graduate in history, it was Madonna University, and they're like a really small university, and I think they only offer like a handful of graduate degrees. Like they have I think a healthcare degree, a business degree, uh, like English as a second language, and then history. So it's kind of weird for kind of a smaller college to offer master's in history degree. Um,
All right. Well, just one last mention for Wayne State. Thanks for offering history degrees. They're
mhm.
a good degree to get. So, onto your teaching experience. How did you get into that? What what did you start at first? The online college or the community college?
Yeah, I started at the online college. I'm still teaching there. I took a couple semesters off in the fall and the winter, but I'm teaching there again now. As someone that didn't have undergraduate in history and not a lot of teaching experience, it was hard for me to get into a teaching position. I got my master's in history in 2012, and I didn't start actually teaching any history until 2017. So it was like 5 years of just applying at every college that I could find. Um, so I started there in 2017. They gave me one history class, and it was ancient history. And they're like, "Well, your main kind of focus in your graduate program was American history, or would you be able to teach ancient history?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's like the part of history I love the most. That's like my um, everyone kind of has their sweet spot in history that they like to study, and mine's ancient history, specifically ancient Rome. So I'm like, yeah, man, that's right up my alley because the course is like ancient Greek and Roman civilization. So I'm like, yes, this is perfect. So I taught one course there, and they liked me, so they brought me back for another course, and then eventually they gave me two courses, and um, normally they don't give three courses because adjuncts they don't want to give you too much work. So, but now they got me pretty much teaching 3 courses all the time. So I teach there online. Since I've been doing it for 3 years, it's pretty easy. It's um, because it's the same course. They only offer one course in history. So after the first year, I kind of mastered teaching that one. And then last fall in 2019, I started teaching at a local community college, teaching history courses there, and also still teaching online.
That's cool. I thought that possibly you'd have to get like a bachelor's in education or something to teach history, but it doesn't seem like that is the case.
It would have helped. I think I wouldn't have had that 5 years of of desperately trying to get jobs if I had
True,
a
when you mention that.
yeah.
So cool. What are I kind of want to know some of your favorite parts and challenges of the teaching aspect of it. Could you expand on that just briefly?
Yeah. Sometimes you luck out and something really cool happens. Like during the first week when you're doing the introductions, yeah, especially on the online format, students are pretty honest. Even in person, they're pretty honest, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm just taking this because I have to take it. Like I have to fulfill this general ed credit." And I'm like, "Okay, cool," because that gives me something to work with. Because I'm like, "All right, they're kind of you know, not really caring about history. They're just kind of taking the course. So then I can kind of take that and hopefully by the end of the course, they love history and it's their favorite topic and they wish they could major in history. So those students I really like. And there's students that already love history that well, your work's not as cut out for you because I already love history, but it's still cool because then they're really into it. So that you're having some great, discussions in the discussion forum with the students and everything, and the students between each other are having some great discussions.
It sounds almost like you turn the challenge of having a disinterested student into one of your favorite parts, which is how do I get this, or almost like a conversion. You're like, how can I convert this person from being apathetic towards history to loving history?
Exactly. Yeah. Because I wanted to, when you become when you want to teach it, it's usually because, you really love it. So you want everyone else to love history as much as you do. So
I feel
that's how
that.
I,
I'm not even a teacher, and I feel that.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something a lot of us historians have in common is like we love history. We want to talk about it. We want to share it and tell everyone else how great it is, and get them as enthusiastic about it as we are.
Yeah, kind of like what you were saying earlier. It really does give a greater sense of what things used to be like and the similarities and deviances from that in the present day.
Mhm.
And your ability to relate to the present with there's this I think it's a idea, or I've heard it around before, but the amount of words that you know kind of limits your reality. So the more words that you know, the greater your reality is going to be. And on that same kind of topic or theme, the more that you know about history, the greater your ability to perceive, like you'll have more to draw from in your relation and interpretation of the current moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that. We're almost wrapping up here. I'm wondering if you have any plans or events coming up related to history, maybe like a special talk or something in a class or.
Not really. Due to the current, COVID-19 situation, like every event I wanted to go to related to history seems like I get an email once a day that something's getting canceled. so, um, but I did still do every year. I do judging for Michigan History Day.
What is that?
It's a hmm?
What is that?
Oh, Michigan History Day. It's for like the state finals.
Judging. All right, yeah, you
Yeah,
judge for the. I assume people compete.
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's kind of like a K through 12 thing where they compete at the local district level, and then eventually they get to the state level. So I do the judging at the state level. This year I was worried we weren't going to be able to do it because the stay-at-home orders and everything. Because this was back in April when things were kind of crazy. but we ended up doing online judging, so it worked out perfect because that's like my highlight of the year because it's K through 12, so you're kind of encouraging the next generation of historians. So which is really important to me because every time I go to like a history conference, I'm usually the youngest guy there, and I'm in my 40s. So um, it's really important to me to kind of encourage the next generation of historians. So that's something they do at the Michigan history finalist or state finals. So every year I've been doing that for like the last 3 years, and I was just really happy that uh, physically it got canceled because usually we all get together up in like Bay City or Lansing to judge the finals, and it's really cool because the kids are there, and they're giving a presentation. You see their enthusiasm for history, so it's a really awesome experience. um, but we couldn't do it physically in person. But me and the other judges were able to do a Zoom conference and watch or look at all the finalist projects and everything, and pick out winners to send to the nationals. So it was still a good event, and I'm really glad we still got to do it to kind of encourage the kids and let them know history is important.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys could adapt to get that figured out. And that is also cool. I don't think I had ever heard of that before. So thanks for sharing with that.
Hmm.
And kind of almost on the same note or vibe, there's on every episode, we're about to finish up here. I got one question left for you. But I give everyone a chance to give a message to those people who are just starting to get interested in history. So it could be children or adults who have an interest and they want to get more involved, but they're not really sure where to start. What's your message to those people who are novices in the historical field?
I think almost anyone, whether they're in a history or not, they'll find that the spot in history or the time period that they're really into. So at first, I was never into the Civil War that much. Um, so if like that to me is not as exciting as like ancient Rome. So if you start kind of studying history or watching history documentaries or reading history books, and you're like, yeah, I'm not into this. Try something else. For example, I had a history Chinese history course when I was an undergrad, and I didn't have any interest in Chinese history. I wanted to learn about ancient history in Rome, and but I took the Chinese history course because it fit with my schedule and everything, and it was really interesting. I loved it. So, just if you're trying to read one history book and you're like, oh man, history is boring, trust me, history's not boring. I promise. You're just not reading the time period or the geographical area that you're into. So keep with it. Just try different things until you find the part you love.
Great. And so, just to summarize all that, basically the last sentence that you said, just keep with your studies, find something that you really enjoy. If reading about the history of books puts you to sleep, try and investigate the history of sports or
Exactly.
different types of weapons throughout history. Really, there's almost no end to what you can look into. Like, just the other day, talking about looking into stuff that you're not really too interested in, or really stuff that you don't think you're too interested in, but then you look into it and you're like, yeah, this is actually kind of cool. I was looking into the history of tar production. One of my patrons had sponsored an article for my website about just a brief history of tar, which is like it's like bitumen. It's like asphalt, except you
Okay.
gotta
Yeah.
make it artificially, and it came out of like the Netherlands. But yeah, basically, I spent like a few hours on that article and reading stuff, and then I just kept wanting to read it. But I've got other things that I need to look into as well, more related to my website. So again, yeah, just looking into stuff that you might not think that you really like, but then you start reading about it and you're like, okay, yeah, this is actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
Maybe don't knock things before you try them type situation for history. Uh,
Exactly.
but yeah, Trico, thanks for joining me today. I had a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
For everybody that's watching this, if you haven't turned it off yet, be sure to go check out my Ctruth Patreon channel where I offer exclusive activities, benefits, and content for as low as $1 a month. If you're interested in history and you have $1 to spare every month, be sure to check that out because you can get access to all sorts of other content that I produce, which is stuff like voting on article topics for my website. I have a Killing Time series where I talk about historical hoaxes and forgeries. I have other things as well on the website or on the Ctruth Patreon, so check that out if you get the chance. Other than that, it's been a pleasure, Trico, and I will talk to all of you viewers next time. Goodbye.